Welcome into another episode of Everything is Logistics, a podcast for the thinkers in freight. I am your host, Blythe Brumleve, and I'm happy to welcome in Joe Monaghan. He is the president and CEO of Worldwide Logistics Group, and we're going to be getting an eagle-eye view of shipping all over the world, especially over the last handful of years, which has been, I don't have to tell, many of you that it's been a little crazy. So we are going to get that perspective from Joe today. So Joe, welcome into the show.
Thanks, Blythe. It's great to be here.
Now, I was joking with you earlier when I first hopped on here with this recording, is that I said it might be easier to say what kind of logistics and transportation that Worldwide doesn't do because you do so many things. So for folks who may not be aware of your company, can you kind of give us, I guess, that eagle eye view, as I said earlier, of the services that you guys provide?
Sure. Our primary services are ocean freight, air freight, customs house brokerage, warehousing and distribution. We do project forwarding. We do exhibition forwarding. Within the warehousing and distribution space, we do e-commerce fulfillment. We do returns management, pick and pack, just a whole array of services.
So really everything is kind of, I think it kind of circles back to. And so when I guess you're thinking of an ideal customer for Worldwide, what does that look like? Is it SMBs? Is it enterprise? Is it kind of a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both, but I mean, really, what we're looking for is people who have complex requirements and really allow us to show how good we are at finding solutions and innovating to help them to simply do things better, cheaper, faster.
I think that's what every business owner wants, especially right about now when costs are just so crazy. So when, taking it back just a little bit for you in particular, there all of the, I guess, leaders and executives that I talk to on the podcast, they all have a unique story about how they got into logistics, but it typically falls into the bucket of I went to school for it or my family got me into it. Do you fall into either of those two buckets of how you got
I
started in
do.
logistics?
I do. Actually, when I was going to school, there weren't that many colleges that offered logistics. Dating myself a little bit, there were very few. So I am in the category of following in my father's footsteps, and actually even my grandfather's
Hmm.
footsteps, because my grandfather was in the railroad business, worked for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, and my father was a long-time executive in the ocean carrier industry. So I started my career working for ocean carriers, and after about a decade, I followed a then boss to another company in the freight forwarding space and spent about a decade there and then started Worldwide Logistics.
And so for folks who don't know, what's the, I guess, the major difference of a freight forwarder versus, like an ocean carrier, or, not really ocean carrier, but maybe like a freight broker, or what's the specialty of a freight forwarder?
Well, I mean, the difference between a freight forwarder and an ocean carrier is that we don't have any assets. I mean, we're asset light. And the same thing would apply to a freight broker in relation to say, a trucking company. So that's the big difference. I mean, I always remember when I first started working for a freight forwarder, I came back from a sales call and I said, "Yeah, this guy asked me if we could do XYZ in Mexico." So I told him no. And my boss looked at me and said, "Why did you tell him no? You should have asked him how much business does he have in that quadrant. Maybe we can create a solution for him and at the same time help ourselves." Whereas, working for an ocean carrier, they call certain ports, they have certain vessels on a schedule, and you sell into that schedule and that port rotation. And if they don't call the port of Timbuktu, then you don't have service from Timbuktu. It's pretty simple.
And so when you were starting, I guess maybe before I get to that point, but how did you come up with the idea to even start up your own company, or did you, or did you follow leadership into Worldwide? What was, I guess, sort of the origin story of Worldwide Logistics?
Well, I'll tell you the true story. I was recruited by another company. I worked for a company called Fritz Companies for almost a decade. They later were sold to UPS and are what is now called UPS Supply Chain Solutions. And after being recruited by another company for literally like 3 or 4 years, I finally decided to take the plunge and I left Fritz. And after 10 months at the new company, I was unceremoniously let go.
Mm.
So I was unemployed in my mid 40s and having a difficult time finding a job that fit the profile that I was looking for. And I had a neighbor who owned a trucking company. He knocked on my door one Saturday and said, "Why don't we just start one from scratch?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" So that's what we did.
I mean, there's no greater motivation than where is your next check going to come from? So it kind of sounds like logistics found you again, a little bit later in life.
Yes, for sure. I mean, two mortgages, four kids with college looming, and you better figure out a way to make some funds.
And so you just celebrated worldwide just celebrated the 25 or 25th anniversary of the company, and I'm curious as to what what has been more challenging, the first 22 years in business or the last 3 years in business?
Um, we had some pretty big bumps in the road in the early days. We were undercapitalized, which really inhibited how much we could grow and expand. We had a very significant bankruptcy by our largest client that almost put us out of business. And all those things happened in the first 22 years. So I'd have to say it was the first 22 years, probably the first 10 years.
Oh wow, so the last 3 years was probably, I mean, going through all of those challenges maybe prepared you for I guess the variety of challenges of the last few years.
We live for change. We live for challenges. That's how we have the opportunity to really demonstrate what's different about us, what's better about us. So the recent history has been a good time for us.
So give us a sense of where the company headquarters is at, because I know you have offices all over the globe. So give us a sense of where you're at right now, and then maybe where your offices are at all over the globe.
Okay. Well, I can start by saying that we started with myself, a bookkeeper, and one operations person
That's
in the
awesome.
basement of a truck terminal in Newark, New Jersey on March 17th, 1998.
Oh wow.
And if we fast forward the movie to today, we operate in 20 countries. We have a couple of more in the oven right now. We'll probably be up to 22 by this summer. We have over 40 offices worldwide. We're headquartered in Paramus, New Jersey. And I'm actually sitting working from home today in a place called Allentown, New Jersey.
Oh, nice, very nice. Yeah, I worked for an asset-based brokerage that Allentown was our one of our big hubs. So lots of freight that's going in and out of Allentown.
Allentown, New Jersey, or Allentown,
Oh,
Pennsylvania?
Pennsylvania.
I'm
There's
in,
another
I'm in
Allentown?
Allentown, New Jersey. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
We
we
are a
were
fraction
Allentown,
of the
PA.
size. Yeah. Yeah.
So how did you decide which was going to be, so you're based in New Jersey. How did you decide what that first country was, or first new office location outside of the US was going to be?
Well, I spent during my time with Fritz Companies, I spent 4 years living in Hong Kong and setting up the offices for Fritz Companies throughout the region. That was back in the 90s. So most of my expertise was in the Far East to US trade. So in the very beginning, the primary business we did was ocean freight from China to the US. So it just made sense for us to open the first office in Hong Kong. And I actually reached out to a very good friend of mine and former colleague and asked him to join us. And he's now our president of Asia Pacific. His name is Willie Fong, and he's been with me now for over 20 years.
Oh wow. So he's had a chance, or both of you have really had a chance to see the full evolution of the sort of I guess East Asia to U.S. relationship, and how that's dramatically grown and evolved into not just China but other several East Asian countries. How did you, I guess, sort of prioritize of what comes after Hong Kong? Was it other different parts of the world, or was it building within that part of the world?
I'd say in phase one, it was primarily expanding into China, where we now have 6 offices. We just opened our office in Xiamen, Fujian province, earlier this year. And for a long time, there was a concentration of purchasing in China versus the rest of Asia. When I first started in the business, there was a lot of activity in places like Thailand and Indonesia and Malaysia and Singapore, Philippines, et cetera. But until the tariffs were imposed during the Trump administration, people did most of their sourcing from China. And with those tariffs, and then later with the pandemic, there's been a lot of movement back to the way it used to be, where people have a more diversified sourcing strategy and they're buying products from a variety of countries. So we sort of jumped on that opportunity. And in the last 3 years, we've opened Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and prior to that, in 2017, we had opened Vietnam and opened Cambodia as a satellite to Vietnam. So we have pretty good coverage throughout the region now.
And so, for a lot of these different offices, I would imagine that they have different focuses, maybe on specific lanes or specific commodities. Is that the case for a lot of these different office locations?
Yeah, it's kind of been fun to watch the evolution because in the early days of our expansion, everything was US centric. So we wanted to know how much business did we control in and out of that country, and how much business could the partner or the general manager that we hire bring to the party, run a business plan and see if it made sense, and then if it did, we just rock and roll. Now it's a little different because with offices throughout Europe, offices in Africa, in the Asian subcontinent, we see our offices, once we plug them into our network, sort of find their own way and start working together and creating business opportunities that have nothing to do with the US.
Oh, wow. Huh.
And that's very gratifying for us. It's also helps us to build sustainability into the future.
And I imagine like everybody wants to diversify as far as your business is concerned, and it sounds like that's exactly what you've done, and a lot of what these remote offices have done as well. Is that a safe assumption?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And
And
we had a global leadership meeting in Marrakesh last October, and it was the first of, sort of typical post-pandemic activity where we were able to bring 50 of our leaders from around the world to one place and just get to know each other and spend time together. Sure, there were meetings and business discussions, but there was just a lot of fun and a lot of hanging out. And the residual effect of that is absolutely incredible. People just have a whole new level of appreciation for each other and working together all the more efficiently. And we've just seen sparks flying ever since then.
is there any, I guess, maybe like country or commodity that is particularly challenging, or like a good challenge to ship to and from?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, there's lots of things that are difficult. Anything that's hazardous, of course, requires extra consideration and handling. We do, and on the distribution side, we do a lot of business in the food space.
Hmm.
So, we have to have special AIB certification at our warehouses, and a lot of extra steps in the process to make sure that they're food grade warehouses. That's been one of the more recent challenges that we've tackled pretty successfully, I would say.
What were the challenges with what you guys were addressing?
When you run a normal warehouse, a general cargo warehouse, you're not thinking about, even, the smallest insect that's able to come under the dock door, or, even the smallest little sliver of space that allows a mouse to enter the warehouse. But if you're, running like we have it here in New Jersey, 300,000 square feet with about half of it containing food products, there are a lot of things that you need to take into consideration, not to mention things like temperature and humidity, access, all those sort of things have to be taken into consideration.
I do. There's a show on National Geographic called To Catch a Smuggler, and I am completely obsessed with the show. And they talk about, especially when it comes to like New Zealand or some of these, just smaller island nations, that they will, even if it's produce or even if it's cooked foods or something like that, they have to check every inch of it just to make sure that there's no fruit flies or no, just the smallest of insects. If it's on that shipment, they will refuse it and turn it right back around, which I think is just fascinating to have to monitor those types of situations. I guess how do you monitor what happens if a small insect, you find it in the truck or something like that, or a mouse sneaks in? Like, what does that process look like to get those little guys out of there?
Well, the first thing we do is isolate the cargo,
Hmm.
and so that we don't contaminate other cargo. Fortunately, it hasn't happened that often, but that's the main thing that we have to do, and we notify the customer. The last time it happened to us was on a new client asked us to receive inventory transfer from their existing distribution provider, and we found out one of the reasons why they were switching from that guy to us when we saw the condition of the cargo when it arrived in our warehouse. So notifying the customer, isolating the cargo, and then if there's any kind of remediation that's required, activate, put the wheels in motion on that remediation right away.
Is there any country that's, I guess, maybe particularly more challenging to ship to when it comes to those kind of like custom regulations and things like that, or is it more maybe on those like small island nations that have to be super strict
Not talking about food, but just talking generally about
in
shipping
general?
to places. I mean, um, there are places in South America, Brazil, for example, where the accuracy of the way you describe the cargo on the documentation is really important.
Hmm.
Even the number of units per inner pack and master carton has to match. It's not just the aggregate number of units that you're trying to import. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of quality control that has to go into moving freight to places like that. But generally, it's for us, it's everyday blocking and tackling. So, we don't really think about it in terms of its complexity. It's just what we do.
Now, one country we haven't mentioned yet is Mexico, and that's sort of, I guess, all the rage here in the U.S., where there's a lot of manufacturing that's switching back over, with reshoring, switching back to the United States or Mexico, Central America, even South America. Do you see that trend continuing to happen in your business?
Absolutely. And we've made investments in Mexico. We opened up in Mexico about 3 years ago, and the operation there is thriving,
Hmm.
handling a large amount of both air freight and ocean freight, as well as, although we're not a customs broker, a lot of our customers ask us to coordinate the customs clearance activity with a local broker. We've even gone out and done site inspections on behalf of customer for potential warehouse facilities. It's been a really interesting area for us for sure. And the interesting thing I think a lot of US people may not understand or realize, but there's an exactly parallel dynamic going on in Europe with nearshoring from Eastern European countries to more labor expensive Western European countries.
Hmm.
So that's one of the reasons why we opened up a 140,000 square foot warehouse in a place called Myslowitz, Poland.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a fantastic location for bringing freight from other Eastern European countries and staging it either for export from the EU or distribution within the EU.
Oh,
And it's
that's
almost exactly parallel to the relationship between Mexico and the US.
Yeah, I guess because my question would probably apply to both situations, because I would think that with the reshoring focus that a lot of US manufacturers are having to Mexico, my first thought was, why hasn't this happened sooner? I would think that that would make enormous amount of sense for just set up staging in Poland for European countries, set up staging or shipping operations in Mexico. Why does it feel like it's taken longer to do some of these things that maybe would have, that make a ton of sense?
Well, I think that the cost for importing things from the Far East was pretty attractive. But when you start to put a pandemic on top of it and increasing labor costs, even in places like China, the dynamic over time evolves and changes, and different decisions are affected as a result.
Now, a big part of logistics and supply chain is obviously the technology aspect of it, the technology piece. How have you guys in it chosen to make those initial investments, and then how are you choosing to prioritize future investments in technology?
Yeah, we had to make a decision a few years ago on make versus buy. And along with one of our other executives, Tom Peacock, I actually spent the 3 weeks right before the world shut down for the pandemic in India, interviewing IT people, and was strongly considering building our own IT capabilities and in-house software, and possibly even spinning it into a software company that marketed that software to others once it was up and running. And after 3 weeks of intensive interviews and analysis, I came back and thought, boy, that's a really bad idea. You could easily drop a few $1 million and end up with nothing. So we use off the shelf software that we consider to be state of the art, and we weave it together using business intelligence tools and APIs so that systems talk to each other. And we're really happy with what we've got structured right now. I think the next step for us is probably to upgrade our warehouse management
Mm.
software, because we use different platforms in Europe from the US.
Hmm.
So we're getting more and more clients who use us in both places. So it makes sense for us to rationalize that. But we are taking our time and evaluating it very carefully, and we'll probably pull the trigger on something in the next 6 months to a year.
How is managing warehouses different in Europe than the US?
It's not so much that managing the warehouses is different, it's the interfaces that are
Mm.
different, different delivering carriers. So, for example, the software that we use in the UK, where we have two 60,000 square foot facilities, is very compatible with the last mile delivery carriers in the UK in terms of integration, versus the system that we use here that integrates very nicely with UPS and FedEx and so forth.
And there was another leader that I was talking to, and she mentioned that over in the UK and a lot of European countries, that their shipping is different in the lens of they get more. A lot of businesses will get same day delivery or just get daily deliveries because their storage areas are so much smaller, and so the warehousing, I guess, just side of the business for them or expense for them is just so different than business owners, say like a restaurant owner
Mhm.
in the United States. Is that some of what you're seeing too?
Yeah, in fact, that was a big consideration on how we're structured in the UK, because we have a large, very modern facility that's in London proper that gives us same day delivery capability to about 25 million people. But it's an expensive place to
Mm.
operate a warehouse. So we operate a similar size facility in the Midlands so that we can do longer term storage and bulk storage for products that can't afford the high cost of London warehousing, and have the London warehouse very specifically for clients that need that rapid delivery within a large metro.
Wow. So it really is like you have a solution for any of your clients. It sounds like. Now, I had mentioned to, or you, there was an interview where you had mentioned that a lot of your business comes from referrals. I'm curious if you guys are actively, I'm sure you have a sales team, a marketing team, but I'm curious as to how Worldwide Logistics thinks about sales and marketing in an area where you get a lot of business through referrals.
Yeah, I mean, we've made a lot of investments in sales in the last few years, and we have a large sales force in the US, but we really try to find salespeople who are very highly experienced and can be consultative in their approach, because we're not about just like throwing prices out there and trying to aggregate volume. We really want to target blue chip clients that are going to be clients of ours for a long time. We have many clients who have been with us for a decade or more. And actually, one client was the first client that we secured back in 1998 when we first started the company, and they still do business with us today. But still, with all that said, referrals is the main source of business opportunities that we see.
Now, you just celebrated 25 years, and I know it's going to an impossible question to answer, but what does the coming years look like for Worldwide? Are you expanding to more countries? I would imagine. I mean, you're already what in 22? I think you said.
We're in 20, we'll be in 22 pretty soon. We have a couple that are close to being completed.
And then for the coming years, how are you thinking about growth? What does that look? Is it new office locations? Is it other modes of transportation? What does that look like for Worldwide?
So, from the standpoint of a global footprint, we have Asia pretty well buttoned down. I don't really see us doing a lot there. We're pretty much everywhere where we think we need to be. Europe is close. We need to look at Italy as a place that we probably need to be at some point, and we'll be opening in the Netherlands within a few months. That'll be one of those 21st and 22nd that I was talking about. And when that's completed, along with we have Germany, Spain, UK, Poland, so we'll have pretty good coverage in Europe. The place where we really see ourselves focused this year and next is in South America.
Mm.
So we opened a huge facility in Miami, a foreign trade zone warehouse in Miami that's equidistant between the seaport and the airport. And we felt that a strong base of operation in Miami was the precursor or the first step toward making investments in South America. So we'll be opening offices in South America, at least two or three this year, and probably another two or three next year.
I've done some. I'm based in Jacksonville, Florida, and so I've done some traveling to South America and Central America. And what struck me is the amount of road construction that I saw on both of my trips to South America and Central America. Is that kind of is it? It almost feels like a hidden gem. It feels weird saying that about an entire continent, but it feels like South America is a hidden gem of transportation and logistics opportunity, and I just keep hearing more and more about it. And it sounds like you guys see a lot of, that opportunity there as well. What do you think is, I guess, the biggest thing holding South America back right now?
Just political stability is the biggest impediment. Um, but we charge ahead. I mean, there's ways for us to do business in places, even if they are not optimal in terms of political stability and environmental issues. So that's what we're all about: is finding a way.
I mean, I feel like that's a great portion to end this conversation. I know you got to go, so give folks, I guess, a sense of if they want to connect with you or if they want to get connected with Worldwide Logistics, where can they go to get that information?
So our website is www.worldwidelogisticsltd.com, and there's all kinds of information on there, videos and lists of offices and so forth. And we have representatives in most major markets around the world, and we'd love to hear from people.
Absolutely. And I will make sure that I put that website address in the show notes just to make it easy for folks to check it out and see more. But Joe, this was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Blythe. I enjoyed it too.